Okay, okie dokie. Hello, everyone. Lori Swanson here, CEO of Inspire Tech, founder of Career Alchemy Academy, and your career alchemy coach. And today, what I want to talk to you about is how to figure out a company culture before you start, right? Um, I think this is such a great topic. So it all started because I was out to breakfast with this VP of digital marketing. And in the conversation, we're talking about a lot of different things. And at one point, I said to her, I'm curious how, when you're interviewing a potential candidate to hire, how do you determine if they're a good fit for your culture? Right. And so she said, I always ask two questions. I first ask, what made you apply to this role with our company? What made you apply? And she's really looking for, you know, um, the response to include information about the company. She said, I really want to know how much do they actually know beyond the role about the company, our mission, our values. So I thought that was really interesting. And then the second question that she always asks is, what are a couple recent projects that you were on where you felt the most accomplished or the most proud? And that's a typical question that we get asked. But what's going on my lipstick, huh? That's a typical question that they ask about recent projects and things you're most proud of. But she's not just looking for the candidates um, involvement in the project. She also wants to hear about the team contributions, and she wants to hear about how that project fit into, the larger um, strategy or again mission of the company. Because when we're talking about culture fit, we're talking about is this a team player? Is this someone who gives credit where credit is due? Is this someone who knows how to shine light on their teammates? Is this someone who understands the importance of the company's mission and values, at least for her company, that they really put a lot of emphasis on the work they did to come up with their value and mission statement and all of those things. And so it isn't something that they just did as an exercise, put it on a poster and hang it in the conference room, but it actually matters to them. So they want to make sure that you've read about that and that you are thinking about that during the interview process. And I thought, wow, those are darn good questions and really helpful from the company perspective in figuring out if someone will be a right fit for their culture. And that got Lori thinking. I was like, okay, so what are some really, if we were going to turn this around, right? If we're going to turn it around and think about it from the person who is considering the company as their next employer, um, what how could we ask questions to help suss a culture, right? Like we want to figure out that culture before we start. Because I, you know, I cannot tell you, we all have heard, probably have all heard the idea that people um, don't leave companies, they leave managers, right? And so, but in fact, even more than that, they leave a culture, because it's the manager and then the manager's boss and then ultimately the CEO of the organization that has created a culture. And if that culture doesn't work for someone, I'm not saying it has to even be a toxic culture, you know, but it could just be a culture that isn't a right fit for you or used to be a right fit, but then the cadence of your life, right? Things have changed for you and it's no longer supportive of you. But we're talking about specifically on a job search. So being able to understand, what is this culture? Because simply asking, how would you describe your culture? Yeah, it's going to give you some answers, but they're prepared. Those are really pat answers, right? And we want more than that. We want them to be digging deeper. We want them to be connecting to their missions and values. So I thought to myself, let's just look at 12 more hiring questions that you can ask, sort of turnarounds that you can ask to help figure out what is a culture. Like with regards to the first question that the VP of digital marketing had talked about, where she was asking, what attracted you, what made you, apply to this role or that sort of thing. You could turn that around and say, one of the reasons I was attracted to your company was your mission statement and the values that you've socialized and have on your website, et cetera. And so I'm curious, how do you see this mission in operation in the everyday, So now you're asking them to really think about connecting this mission and visions and values that they have in a poster in the conference room. Like, is it really something lived? The second one that she had asked was around like the recent accomplishments that the candidate might be most proud of. So you can turn that around and you could say, can you tell me about 2 or 3 things that your team has recently accomplished that brought them a sense of pride? And even further, how this particular project or these accomplishments align with the company mission and values. So that's a little bit of a 2-part question. You could do it as a 1-parter. You could do a follow-up question as a second part. And I have, in these other 12 that I created, I have the same sort of scenario where I might tell you 2 questions, but you might separate them out. And you're going to make these your own anyways, right? But let's get with some 12 more turnarounds that you can use to get really deliberate about and committed to a sense of feeling and real facts and data behind how a company operates. What is this culture? How does it support the teams? And so here are some more questions. So the hiring team might ask you, tell me about a time when you received feedback that was hard to hear. How did you respond? And again, some of these questions that the hiring team is going to ask you, you probably already heard in your interviewing, experience, because they aren't uncommon questions. We're just turning them around and kind of pushing back and saying, hey, now you tell me about this. So the turnaround for that one might be, can you share a time when someone on your team received feedback? How was it delivered? And what support did the company give them to help them move forward? Great question, right? Another question, the hiring team might ask you, how do you like to be recognized for your work? The turnaround to that might be something like, how does the team or the company or leadership typically recognize great work? Can you give me an example of this? Someone being acknowledged at some point for something they did. It's an opportunity for them to brag on themselves and to brag on their team and to brag on, the employees and things like that. And so it makes it a great question. All right, another one. So let's say this one we hear a lot, describe your ideal work environment, right? So you give them your answer. And I would say these hiring team questions that I'm talking about here, the ones we're turning around, these are really good questions to spend some time writing out your answers to if you're in interview mode right now as a interview prep, part of your interview prep. So in any case, they're asking you about to describe the ideal work environment, and you will then turn that around by saying, how would you describe the work environment at company ABC? Especially in terms of communication and collaboration and the day-to-day pace. Like, again, those particular, especially arounds, those are the things that are really important to you in a culture. You might throw those in. All right, next one. How do you navigate ambiguity or shifting priorities? So again, they're asking you that. They want to kind of understand how you navigate that. What do you do when you've been all in on something and the next thing you know, they're like, oh, nope, stop that, move over here, right? It happens. So your turnaround question to kind of get a sense of how that happens inside their company and with their culture is, how would you describe when priorities shift, how does leadership help teams navigate that change? And can you share a recent example? I love to get examples, like it's one thing to say, oh, this is how they do it. It's another thing to say, can you give me an example? Now, they might not have an example rolling off their tongue, and that's okay. Cut them a little slack. And they do this for you, right? You can easily say, hey, no big deal, but if you think of something, just email me. I'm just curious, right? I think it's an interesting story to hear about an organization. Next question. What kind of leadership brings out your best work? They might ask you. You turn it around and you say, how would you describe the leadership style here in the organization? What do successful employees appreciate about it the most? What do they appreciate about the leadership style? And so I just love all these questions. Let's go on to the next one. So again, the hiring team may ask you, how do you approach collaboration and cross-functional teams, let's say? Your turnaround would be something like, how do teams here collaborate across functions? Can you share a cross-functional success story, like a project success story, and why you think it was successful? So again, a little bit of a three-part question there. Feel free to ask them, the first part, just ask them how the teams collaborate across functions, and then follow on with, can you tell me about a time when, there was a cross-functional project that went really well and what you think made it successful, or, something like that. Yeah, you get what I'm throwing down. Next question. So the hiring team may ask you, what are your expectations around work-life balance? That's like one of those questions, right? How do you answer that? And there's ways to answer that, but that's not where I'm going today. But I've definitely coached around that because that's a loaded question. And so let's turn it around and let's load it up for them, right? So you can ask them, how does the team handle work-life balance during normal weeks and the busy ones? Peak periods, we're going to have those. And what are the norms around unplugging? So you can word this in such a way that feels genuine to you, but you really understand what you're trying to get at underneath it all, depending on how you phrase that question. But you're really wanting to understand work-life balance, right? And believe me, the companies that really work-life balance, like their priorities are the company and delivering the company product, no matter what, they will respond that way in some format like that. You'll know, oh, this is a place that, there's not, the company hours are a little loose, and it isn't just at peak times, it's probably all the time, right? And so that is that is a question that they generally will answer truthfully, and you will get a lot of information about that, about the work-life balance and how that's handled, just because they're drinking the Kool-Aid usually, and so they'll answer just how they would answer, and you'll be like, oh, okay, I get it. So next question, the hiring team may ask you, how do you stay connected to the mission, to the mission of your past employers in your day-to-day work? Like, they want to understand, because especially if this company's mission is really important to them. So turn it around and just say, how does leadership help employees stay connected to the company mission? Are there rituals or stories or practices that they have in place that help to continue to, and we think about the mission, right? We're thinking about the why. Why do we show up every day? Why are we getting out of bed? Because you might have clients that are unhappy that you have to deal with sometimes through the business. And so having a real strong understanding of that why keeps you going, keeps you remaining positive, keeps your energy up, of course, reduces burnout. There's all these kinds of reasons to have a real sense of beyond a paycheck, a real sense of, and you want to be connected to an overall company mission. We think, and I think it's true for a little while, or maybe at different times in our lives, where we're less concerned about the mission and values of an organization. We really, we're trying to very, very focused on building our own credibility, our own skill set, those sorts of things. And however we're doing that, whether we're connected to a mission or not, doesn't really matter. But there's a point that it becomes important to believe in what the company is doing in the world. For a lot of people, especially because I work with women, right? It's similar to the idea that I'm very involved, or I guess let's say involved, I could be more involved with an organization, Invest for Better, and they are helping women, understand money. And one of the key things, and I've talked about Janine Firpo before, and she also has a new platform that's launching called Sheconomy that's really going to be amazing. But the real point to all of this is that women invest differently than men. Women are looking for different outcomes from their money than men. For example, when women invest, and I'm not saying 100 out of 100, I'm not saying, like every woman, or I'm not even saying every single stock they have, but they will, or investment vehicle, but they will consider the impact on the community. They will look to organizations like a Patagonia that has give back. These things align with their values. And so there is a point like that where the company we're working for, we're not just believing in the work we're doing, that we like the work we're doing and we like our clients, but we're bigger belief in what the company mission is and how they are contributing to, a better society. So ask the question. Don't let it hang. Some of these questions are probably going to be some that these hiring managers and HR folks have never heard someone ask before. That's okay, especially because people leave for culture fit and leadership. And those two are opposite sides of the same coin. You can't have a leader that has certain values and things that he or she professes and lives by, and then have a culture that's different than that. It just doesn't work like that. So, another question. So they may ask you about what keeps you engaged at work, right? What keeps you engaged? And so the turnaround for that is like, what kinds of work or initiatives tend to energize the team and help with engagement? Why is it? What is the common threads for engagement, throughout the organization? Next question. They may ask you, how do you stay connected? No, not that one. Tell me about the best team that you were ever a part of. What made it work? That is a form of that question is asked generally on interviews. So having a good answer to that would be, time well spent. But how do you turn that around so you get an understanding, right? So turn it around by saying, what characteristics define the best teams inside your organization? And could you give an example of a team that's really thriving and why? So that could be a two-parter, or each of those are standalone. You can ask them about the characteristics of the best team, or you can just say, can you give me an example of a team that's thriving inside the organization, and why do you think that is? I love that question. I like all of these, but I just like, we want to thrive at work, right? And so that they can easily respond to, oh, let me tell you about, this project or this project team or this thing that we, just launched, blah, 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 and all the reasons why the team thrived throughout the process, even when there's obstacles and roadblocks. That can go a long way to telling you about the culture. Second to last question. So they might ask you, what frustrates you in a workplace? And, I think that's good to know. What frustrates you in a workplace? There can be some really good info in that question. So let's turn it around for them and say, what are some challenges that employees sometimes face here? And you might start with something like, there's always going to be challenges in a company of your size, or there's always going to be challenges, within the workforce at different points for different reasons. But how does the company support people when these challenges occur? The individual, right? The individual. So finally, the hiring team question that they might ask you is, how do you prefer, this is one of my favorites too, how do you prefer decisions be made within a team? So they're asking you, how do you prefer that decisions get made in a team? Or how have decisions been made on your teams in the past? And you want to turn it, how decisions are made, very important part of a culture. So you turn that around and you say, when decisions need to be made quickly, for example. I like, like we're putting a little time constraint on this one. I decided that made, it doesn't have to be, but I think this is a very pointed, right? So when we have to make, or when the team or the company has to make decisions quickly, what's the decision-making process? Who has the voice? How does the team stay aligned? Who's the final decision maker? All of those things are legit questions to ask around decision making. So there you are, 14 questions, and the 2 that we originally started with, and 12 more. And the big takeaway, I think, is that hiring teams are evaluating you for fit, right? I mean, we've all heard one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. And if you've ever had that happen, where you have that one employee on your team that just, is not like the others, or I don't know if that Sesame Street song came into my head. But it just doesn't fit, not any reflection on them as a human. It's just, they just are kind of always, one step ahead, one step behind, just off center or something like that, out of alignment with the rest of the team and where they're moving. So they don't want to create that on the team. So they're very serious about making sure you'll fit into the culture of that team, that department, that organization, right? And so you should are best to evaluate their culture for your fit as well ahead of getting hired. Don't wait till you get there. I don't know how many times I've heard, this was not what I understood from the interview process. And maybe it's on them. Maybe they're covering some things up, but also taking 100% responsibility would say, it's on you 100%. With these questions that you did or did not ask during the interview process. And yes, we will be like, God, I didn't ever think to ask that question. How did I not think to ask that question? We're going to miss stuff. But if you can be patient in the interview process, don't worry. I wouldn't ask all of these questions, obviously, but pick the ones that feel the most important to you, given your values and the type of culture you want to work in. And then ask those questions. You can ask, you can split these questions up among a bunch of, because culture questions are not just HR. That's you can ask teams, you can ask leaders, you can ask HR, you can ask a leader from another team that you're not even going to work on. You can ask these questions, split them up, or take this, 2, 3, 4 maybe max that you're asking talent and ask the same questions of everybody as you go, getting all those different perspectives, right? So the real genius in this process, I think, is that by turning their culture questions back on them during the interview process, it goes from a one-sided evaluation or a little lopsided evaluation of them, of you, and you've turned it into a true conversation of, hey, this is an important decision for all of us, who you hire and who I accept an offer from. The only other tip I would give is really tuning into your spidey senses. So as you're asking these questions, notice if it feels forced, disingenuous. They're not necessarily going to have, as the interviewee, you're working on your star stories, right? I call them SOAR, but star stories. You're working on those. You're preparing your responses to questions. The company, has kind of their pat questions, responses that most people ask. So this is going to be different, but it's okay. So be patient with that process, because this is how important it is that for both sides, and you can say that, thank you for giving me the extra time to dig deep into some of these culture questions, because I know that when someone doesn't fit well into a culture, it's hard for the team and it's hard for the person. And it can have a lot of, longer term repercussions for the individual. And I'm not saying that you've had that happen, but you can just thank them for the opportunity to dig a little deeper and then tune in and trust your spidey senses to looking at how they're responding and how quickly they're responding. Because you're going to then see, their leadership style, their collaboration style, their communication style, their decision-making style. You're going to see how the mission and the vision and the values line up with their responses so that there is congruency. If they've spent all this time determining a mission and vision, how, it should be congruent. So, and you get to be more clear, more certain, more empowered insight into the organization you're considering, so that when the offer comes, you're not hesitating. You have asked all the questions, and not only do you understand your role and your responsibilities and the expectations of you in that arena, and not only do you understand who you'd be working with and who you'd be, collaborating with and, across the organization, but you also understand how they view their culture and how they are, they have actionable, I guess I would say, or proof really, that that they walk the walk and talk the talk. So that is my little rant for today, because that's how important I think company culture is. And so if you have any questions, or you can get a copy of all of these questions, that you can listen to this recording for a little while on LinkedIn. You can DM me and I'll send you a link to sign up for my blog. And that blog sits out on my website always under the resources page. So you can see it there. You can sign up for it at the bottom of the page, which is follow this QR code. That'll get you, this might take you to private coaching with me, but from there you can get to, or look at the navigation bar at the top, and I think you can get to the resources. And at the bottom of the page, you can sign up for the newsletter. The only other thing I want to say today, before I peace out, is if you're on my email list, you would have seen this. Maybe you've seen some stuff in social, but when I was recently and I'm going to talk about this next week. So I'm not going to tell you how this came about. That's it. I've just decided. I'm not going to tell you why I'm made 2 opportunities to work with me. If you sign up by the end of the year, next week, I will be talking about talkling because it's about waffling. Um, I will be talking about how these opportunities, how I decided to create them like really fast. But just know that you can. I have not done career strategy sessions in a long time. I incorporated them into my larger coaching package, but I have opened up an opportunity to map out your 2026 career plan, getting the basic vision in place and the what I call your very important priorities, these first few steps that you can take to bring that vision into reality. We will work on that in a 2-part call. And the second opportunity is if you're on a job search or thinking about kicking off a job search in 2026 and your job search has stalled a little bit, or you're feeling like, boy, it seems like a lot of moving parts, because a job search is a lot of moving parts. I've opened up 6 sessions all about successfully navigating a job search, and you can, and we'll do that over as, it's over 3 months, but we can also condense it. If you're like 6 weeks, let's go. Or if you want to spread it out over 3 months, whatever works best for you and your schedule. You sign up by December 31st, and you'll receive an email from me, and we'll schedule either the strategy session or our first private coaching session in January. So after the holidays, you just need to make the decision now to sign up. So that's it. And where do you find those? You need to DM me ready or email me ready, and I will reply with the links to join. And again, it expires December 31st. I'm certain I will do it again at some point, but it won't be in January. I know that for certain. So let's go and let's just get things moving in your career and get that job search back on track. And I am, as you see, it looks like I'm wearing, I thought, the snow from my Christmas village. But I am hosting a holiday event tonight. And so I'm all ready to go because, of course, I'm working right up to the time where I need to start to set up. And it's holiday times, and this feels like a sweater I can't wear all winter. Maybe I could, but I certainly can wear it today. So enjoy the holidays. I am here next week hold on. Next week's Christmas Eve on Wednesday. So we do not have a LinkedIn Live next week. So if I am writing a newsletter, I do have a blog coming out. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, otherwise on the week of New Year's Eve, probably on the 29th, I will go live and talk about the waffling and give you a couple more days to sign up for these 2 special offers and opportunities to work with me. So that's all today. Hope everyone has a wonderful, happy, and healthy holiday. Blessings to all of you. Love, peace, and flow and ease and harmony and all of the good things. Talk to you soon.